Okay, so hello there, Katie.
Hello.
You were saying you haven't done a Facebook Live before, so this is new for
Now, this
you.
is new for me, so if you're joining us, be kind. Bear with me. No, I'm happy you're here.
Yeah, and we'll pop in and just see who's here. I don't know how many people we'll have today because, as I said, in the UK, it's glorious today. So it might be that everybody wants to be outside and they don't want to come and sit by a computer, unless they've got their phone, of course. But hopefully, we'll have a few people joining us, and it will be recorded anyway, so people can join us afterwards. So if you're joining us afterwards, then lovely to see you. I've got Susie so far. Hi,
Hi,
Susie. Nice
Susie.
to see your name, if not you. And we'll have some more people joining. So, as we get started, then, Katie, I know you started this work having gone through your own journey as well. So, do you want to briefly talk about your own journey into your own personal journey through?
Yeah, sure. I landed myself in a chronic pain situation in the summer of 1998. I was
Right, you remember it
backpacking
well.
through Europe. Uh,
Right.
I had an enormous backpack, and I kind of one day when I wasn't wearing a backpack, just kind of stood up, and my back was out. It hurt.
Mhm.
I was 20 years old, so I
Right.
just assumed that it would get better
Mhm.
because I was young and fit, and I
Yeah.
hadn't had any physical problems before. And it didn't. It continued to get worse. I was studying abroad at the time. I'm originally from the States, for other folks that are um,
Mhm.
on the call that are in the UK and elsewhere. So I didn't really have easy access to medical care and things like that. But in the time between my fall and spring semester, I did come home and get an MRI. And, sure enough, I had a herniated disc and they wanted to operate. And I said, I want to go back to Europe for my spring semester. So I spent a miserable spring in London studying theater and lying on the ground or
Gosh.
standing up in class. And the next summer, I kind of decided that it was time to get surgery, as there weren't a whole lot of other options at that point. I had been through the physical therapy. I'd had 3 cortisone injections. I had a big old, hard back brace. It was
Right.
awful.
Oh,
So
gosh.
I got the surgery, went back to school, and recovered from the surgery. There wasn't sciatic pain going down my leg, but I never fully felt better. And then the pain
Mm.
started shifting to my upper back and other areas, and it kind of would move around. And then it was on the other side of my lower back. And so for the next 20 years, I went through a period of time where I was just, going to all the different body workers. I was going to back and forth to the doctor. Um, I, I don't know how many bouts of physical therapy I did. Um, did all the sort of alternative medicine, Chinese medicine, went down the functional medicine rabbit hole.
Mhm. And was this like a constant pain that you had? I mean, you said it was moving around. Did you always have?
Yeah, it was a constant pain. And there were worse days than others. I would have flares where I would be, had to call in from work and go to, just
Right.
bed all day. And,
Yeah.
I found different ways to sort of cope and live my life, but
Mhm.
it was not a great quality of life. I was
Mm.
in my 20s, I was in my early 30s, and
Yeah.
this is prime of your life. You go out and
Yeah.
you have friends and you
Absolutely.
party, and I wasn't doing any of that really.
Right.
So I guess I kind of came across this sort of mind body work in many different ways. At some point, I heard an interview with a comedian on the radio, and he was talking about Sarno's book and how just reading the book fixed his back, and I was like, that's crazy. I'm going to check out the book, though. I bought the book. I read the book. I said, that is bullshit. And I put it back on the shelf. And then a couple other times things would come into my awareness from other experts. I read Gabor Mate's When the Body Says No.
Yeah.
That was one of the big game-changing books for me. That was like, oh wow, there might be something to this other book I read, this Sarno book, and I started kind of learning a bit about the nervous system, and I started reading up on the vagus nerve, and I started reading just a bunch of things that was all sort of funneling into this sort of mind body scenario. And not a whole lot of this work existed at the time. This was maybe like 10 years ago. And I was just kind of piecing it together.
Right.
But then once I started learning about, neuroplastic pain, I started kind of just buying into that whole thing. What helped me kind of in the beginning to get better was I saw a coach. I saw a health coach, and I was mostly dealing with, sort of ways I was feeling stuck in my life, rather than it wasn't about pain that I was working with, but I was noticing with working with her, all the things that I had been doing to help myself get better, like going to the massage therapy, like every week. I went to, sometimes twice a week, I'd go to massage therapy. It helped for, a good 10, 15 minutes. And then it would come back. And I kind of started to take stock of like, what is working? What is not working? Where am I just giving my money, my time, my energy away for someone else to fix me when it's really diminishing returns at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
I kind of stopped doing a lot of the things I had been doing and started to kind of look inward at, what I knew to be true about the situation, and ways that I could help myself as my own healer in this. And that's kind of the point where things clicked and shifted for me. And also the point where I was like, I think I could become a coach and help other people do this too. So that's where I ended up. I started a coaching program and did 2 years of coach training, and then always with the mind to work with pain. And then, I started the SERPA training. I was reading all of Howard Schubner's work and Alan Gordon's work, and now I coach, and I love it. It's very interesting. I mentioned I had a theater background, and I'm finding that I'm bringing a lot of tools that I use as an actor into coaching. Not that I'm faking being interested, but I'm listening really well, and I'm using my improv skills, not knowing like what's going to come at me to respond to wherever my client is in the moment, and help them kind of find their own path towards healing.
Great. And I think it's so helpful when you've experienced it yourself. I think that's so good, because I think when we've been there, we've gone through it all, it can be really helpful because we understand it experientially. I just want to say hello to everybody who's joined us so far, and hello to others who are joining us with listening to it. And if anybody else would like to say hello, please do jump in, say hello, tell us where you are, and if you've got any questions, then do ask. Before we move on, I just want to read out Susie's question. She said, were there any other chronic issues that didn't involve pain that you experienced?
Well, as I pieced together my background, once I learned about this idea of chronic pain or, nervous system dysregulation, I did realize that before I had chronic pain, I had, terrible like stomach issues, bowel issues,
Mhm.
and I also had a lot of anxiety.
Right.
What would be called anxiety. So that was for me. But,
Mhm.
now I work with people that, have other chronic issues besides chronic pain. And
Yeah.
that's the interesting thing is like, with this, lots of things can pop up that aren't necessarily, pain, but they're chronic issues. And all of them are telling us the same thing, that like there's something amiss here.
Yeah.
Something doesn't seem right. Pay attention.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and that can be from
thanks.
any system in the body, basically.
Yeah.
Obviously, from the musculoskeletal, the pain, tingling, weakness, things like that, to the, like you said, the stomach issues and heart palpitations, all sorts of things. Basically, where there are nerves involved, they can also be triggered by stress and basically be a projection from the mind. And with you saying about your theatre background, I've been away this weekend in Belgium on a part of a course that I'm on, and one of the things they got us doing was actually having a sort of like a clowning session. So we had to either stand there and do nothing or stand there and clown around, and it was really looking at what, with everybody else watching and cheering or just sitting down, or sometimes people came out and there was nobody there because everybody'd hidden. And it was just to start being really aware of how we felt inside, and to be able to really acknowledge that and feel it, hand it over. And it was really interesting, really interesting. And a couple of the girls who were sisters, actually, they were going to be last on, and they were hiding behind this hut in this woodland pavilion, waiting to go on. And just they said they just felt almost sick. They were just sort of really, are we even going to be funny? Oh gosh, it's going to be so hard. And actually what happened was when they actually came out, well, it happened that they couldn't do it because the people who worked there were going to run a children's thing. And so they asked the girls, and they said, well, how long are you going to be? And they said, oh, about half an hour. They said, oh, that's fine, we don't start for half an hour. But unbeknownst to the girls, they came and started setting up the stage. And so we then quietly were told to all just very quietly gather our stuff together and disappear. So when they came out, nobody'd be there. Again, to see their reaction. As it was, the people that worked there saw what was happening, so they went back and told them. And they came out and they just burst out laughing. And they were just saying, there's a bit of relief they didn't have to do it. But again, just showing how the mind starts playing all this out, and that they were feeling really nervous, but they weren't actually doing anything. It's really just recognizing how the ego gets so involved and the mind is so involved and starts creating sensations in the body when nothing actually is happening. And it's about learning to be in the moment. Susie's saying, I think it's so important not to exclude people who don't have pain. I agree, Susie. Unfortunately, with for many of us, for the marketing especially, it's basically about pain. But we also include in the books and the training that we do, we talk about all the other conditions as well. The focus generally is on pain. Living Proof do a lot of work with fatigue and other non-pain symptoms. Hopefully they in time will write a book about the non-pain symptoms. You have to find somebody really who has a passion in that area, who then wants to develop that area. With SERPA and certainly my training with a physio background, it tends to be more about the pain, more about the musculoskeletal. And again, weakness, for example, is the musculoskeletal, and we very much include that as well. But in the getting out there and reaching out to other people on the whole, it is pretty much pain-based. But hopefully one of these days, maybe, Penny from Living Proof and I were talking about it, and it might be that a couple of them put together a book about the non-pain conditions. For me, it's not a passion to focus on that, but to cover all the everything. But yes, on the whole, chronic pain, because that's where we started.
Yeah, I find I often, am correcting myself because pain was my experience, but it's not everybody's experience. So I often will correct to chronic symptoms rather than pain.
Yeah, and it's trying to encourage people where pain is, just put your symptom in there. Yeah. So through our recovery program, for example, we make it very clear, if you don't have pain, then replace the word. When we say the word pain, I usually will put pain stroke symptoms in our updated recovery program. But on the whole, we will put pain, and if we just have put pain, then we'll just say, just replace your symptom with that. But I get where you're coming from, Susie, and maybe there will people who will have a passion to develop programs or books where they specifically promote and focus on non-pain symptoms. So you went through your own experience, and then you became a coach, and I know you still do some theatre work. You've got a few things that you are doing as well. So in your coaching work, so what are the sort of conditions that people present with that you see?
It's all over the map. Right now I've got a handful of clients. One is dealing with chronic fatigue. One is dealing with neuropathy. One is dealing with general anxiety. Mm-hmm. One is dealing with back pain. One is dealing with foot pain. So it's really it's kind of whoever is interested in kind of exploring this work. And there are some commonalities, and there are some really just diverse things. One commonality I often see is, just and it's totally normal, a need to figure it out. If only I can get the right answer of what is causing this, then I will feel so much better.
Yeah.
Or if only I could do the exercise right or enough, or generally putting a lot of pressure on ourselves to have the answer, find the answer, search for the answer, which, clearly that's that's kind of the way logic works, is there's something wrong, I need to fix it and figure it out. A lot of what this work is a little counterintuitive. It's okay, well, what happens if I kind of take some of that pressure off myself, ease up in this sort of tight grip of needing to know or solve or fix, and
try all the techniques and decide sort of what strategy should I use now, and I'm using all these strategies and I'm still no better.
Yeah.
And I think what goes into this is, you mentioned, because one of the things to talk about is about how, like you said, people try so hard to understand or try to get better. And what you said earlier to me was that there was no particular time when you suddenly realized that you didn't have pain. And I think that's important, because usually the focus is so much on the part of the body where the problem is. And clearly, to not know that you are better, or that you were able to do something that you couldn't do before, means your attention was more global, more on your life and what you were doing in your life, rather than focus specifically on that symptom or condition and trying to get better.
It's interesting, once it stops being something that you're monitoring every second of every day, and start just kind of living your life, how all of a sudden normal that feels, and you don't even realize I haven't even thought about preparing myself to do this movement or picking up this box or anything for quite a while.
Yeah, absolutely. So I hope that's helped answer your question, Karen. If there's anything else, then do ask. But there's lots of common behaviors like that definitely, that trying hard, and the personality side of things as well, that the pressure we put on us. So it's really looking at, you can look at all sorts of personality traits. And for example, analyzing, if you're an overanalyzer, you know what, if you're working in science, for example, or a particular area of your work, you need to overanalyze, really be specific and analyze. That's great. Use that then. But to recognize when it's not healthy, not useful to overanalyze, like get to a point of when is enough enough. Okay, let's let go. And we talk about letting go and surrendering, and that's quite an active thing. It's not a passive, oh, I can't be bothered anymore, I'm just going to let go. Although some people actually just go, do you know what, I'm going to just stop this now and change. But it's an active letting go, isn't it? Rather than, it's like, otherwise it can be more like in a victim mode, whereas this is actually, I choose to let go. Okay, yeah, so that's interesting, Kate. Is this lifelong work? It depends what you're thinking about work. Because it was saying then about your focus on the symptom and things, and that's just, we need to retrain our brains, because it's like if you're in love, you've just fallen in love with someone, your focus is on that person all the time, that you just can't stop thinking about them often. And so this is more about retraining our brains away from the condition, the symptom, but also we'll come on to this because we're going to talk about, life, aren't we? Generally, not just strategies. But as far as lifelong work, how, let's put it this way, if you start learning a new skill, maybe you're learning to surf, maybe you're learning to ski, you're learning to ride a bike, it's hard work, isn't it? It's hard work to begin with, and you're having to really think about it and practice. And that's the same with this. You think, right, okay, I want to stop and meditate, or I must do my emotional awareness. And initially, it's consciously trying to remember to do something, or consciously practicing. But the more you do it, the easier it gets. Learning to be emotionally aware, learning to really notice how we're feeling. That for me now is completely natural. Something happens, I'm aware. If I've been triggered, I'll be aware and I'll pause and I'll immediately take time to do something about it. At first, if you're not even aware of it, of course it's going to take time and it's going to feel like work. But this is about looking, it doesn't become work. It becomes, you become more in flow, because you just know when you're stressed or when something's happening, what you need to do about it. But yes, it is about, if you go back to being that overly perfectionistic, overanalyzing, ignoring how you're feeling when you're stressed, yes, that's going to be tough. So if you say lifelong work is about not going back to how we were, but recognizing how much easier life is when we remember these things, it becomes automatic. So okay, so what about Katie then? Next thing that Kate's asking, what are your tips for maintenance? Maybe that's a good lead into what we were talking about.
Yeah, earlier. I mean, going back to the lifelong work thing, yes, some of it is lifelong work, and it's just a different habit that you're building. Yeah. So
is it work?
Georgie said, it's like it becomes like brushing your teeth, where you don't even think about it. It's just kind of part of your daily thing. But there's, old stuff. I mean, that for me, that still comes up, perfectionistic thoughts or people-pleasing behavior, where I notice like, oh, there I am. I'm doing that thing again. And I'm kind to myself instead of, beating myself up for doing that thing again. That self-compassion work for me is lifelong work.
But then it becomes something that is, it's the word work I don't like.
Yeah.
Because it's not work. It just becomes natural. It's a natural thing. You either in the past sort of just push and keep busy and all these balls juggling, or you actually learn your lessons and you go, actually, life's a lot easier when you don't get pushed to the point where you get a symptom. Or you start picking up more easily when you're being triggered, or when you notice that there's a sensation. You just go, oh, okay, that's interesting. Okay, I'm going back into the old habits. So I think for me, yes, it's about becoming more aware of what's going on. And like you say, being self-compassionate and just not going down the rabbit holes that we used to go down.
Yeah, to go back to the Gabor Mate analogy. He's got a new book out called The Myth of Normal, which I love.
I love that book.
And he talks a lot about authenticity. And it's really, this work is also about learning how to be more of your authentic self.
Absolutely.
And that can be very difficult in a world that is sort of designed for you to fit in or have security or acceptance or whatever we need to do to survive. And finding a little bit more of that balance towards authenticity over time, I think, is kind of our life purpose.
Yeah.
To get sort of broad here.
Yeah, I agree. And I just noticed, Susie, you've just said maybe it's like becoming fluent in a new language. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So challenging at the start, but then it becomes natural to you, and easier to switch as well when you're aware. So yeah.
I find it's interesting because a lot of times, and I was one of these people too, that, like you think back to the time before, you had symptoms, and you idealize that time of like, life was perfect back then, but life was not perfect because whatever your coping strategies that you were using at that point that were helpful to start with ended up not being helpful. And that's kind of the reason why we end up with a chronic symptom in the first place. So when people are kind of in that place of nostalgia or going back to what they used to be or what they used to do, I really try and help them cultivate, okay, well, what are you learning now about what you used to do that maybe isn't serving you anymore? And how would you like to be instead? What is the you now? What is the future you? That's, you 2.0 or 3.0, which is even a better version of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think often when people go through this, they think they just want to get rid of the pain and get back to how it was. And then when they start learning that this is like a personal development program, and they realize, actually, no, I don't necessarily want to be as I was, because that's why I got into where I am now, and therefore learning the version that they want to be and absolutely becoming more authentic, and started to feel comfortable with that. So great questioning so far. Thank you. We've got quite a few people listening. If you want to ask any questions, and welcome all the people that are listening to the recording as well. So Susie says, how do you align with the idea that you should never talk about your symptoms? How does this fit with not repressing your feelings? I'm not sure that they necessarily go together, really, because acknowledge it, it's about noticing. You don't have to be talking about the symptoms, but noticing when something increases. That's often when, if you become aware of the emotions, that's often when it then will increase the symptom. But it's not about talking about them, it's about feeling. So I think it's more about emotional awareness, and really tuning in and noticing, and then learning to acknowledge, express, let the emotions come up and pass by, rather than ignoring them, which most of us do before we start understanding this. We just sort of push through everything and we don't acknowledge how we're feeling. What would you say about that, Katie?
Yeah, I mean, there's schools of thought with this work that, like, you're not supposed to talk about your symptoms, or you're supposed to give them another word like bananas. For me, like, it's kind of a personalized approach with that, because there's on the one hand focusing on your symptoms and only your symptoms and nothing else, can land you kind of in this sort of constant rumination, which is just keeping your nervous system in a heightened state and not helping the situation. It often, makes the symptoms worse. But there is a part of acknowledging, well, I have this sensation, this symptom, this feeling. Where is it? Getting curious about it. Like, where is it? What does it exactly feel like? What words would I use to describe it? And when we can kind of define it a little clearer, it becomes a little bit separated from ourselves, and it can be something that's, we can kind of observe rather than like feel totally consumed with.
Yeah.
So that can be helpful too.
Absolutely. I think when it comes to talking about the symptoms, it's more about if the first thing in the morning you wake up and your partner, let's say, says, "Oh, how's your back? How is it?" It's about really that's reinforcing it. So if everybody you see says, "How are you feeling today? How's your back?" You're in that victim mode, and you're in that, I am somebody with pain or whatever the other symptom is. So often when it is about using other symptoms, as an example, one of my clients who used the term, she had tinnitus, and she decided to use the name Tinkerbell. And that was great because actually her partner would say, "How's Tinkerbell today?" It's a completely different thing. "Oh, how's your tinnitus today?" Apart from the fact that she said the word like tinnitus was like scraping her fingernails down a board. So every time somebody said, "How's the tinnitus today?" then it just made things worse and made a focus on it. It was dramatic, changing that to a less fearful term like Tinkerbell. So I think it's very individual, but it is the primary reason for either completely not talking about it or changing the name. It's dependent on you as an individual, but I think it's the main reason is so that you are not focusing constantly on it, and that, like you say, you can become separate from it or seeing it in a softer way. So like Tinkerbell definitely is a more fun, silly way. Somebody had leg pain and decided to use the LP for lovely pins. So her husband would say, "How's your lovely pin? How are your lovely pins today?" Again, that sort of separation and making it fun as well. Yeah, I know what you mean, Susie. Again, it's the focus. It's about not constantly talking. It doesn't necessarily mean you can't talk whatsoever about it. But if you are, it's talking about extremes. If you're somebody who are, if you're all surrounded by people, and I know you're not, but if you are surrounded by people who are constantly asking you how you are, how you're doing, what's going on, you can be stuck in that victim role. And so it's finding a happy balance depending on your circumstances, depending on your condition, depending on a number of things. So it's more looking at not getting to that extreme side of constantly focusing and talking about it all the time. That's when it's not healthy.
Yeah, and I'll say too that, when we're able to kind of look at it and ask ourselves the question of like, what do I need right now? Maybe that need is, I just need to feel held. I need to feel seen. I need to feel heard. And those are all valid things. And those are things we can sometimes even give to ourselves if there isn't somebody around to meet that need, or meet that need in the way that we need to have it met. So, but really sort of being able to ask yourself and your body, like, what do I really need right now? Can be a really good way to both acknowledge, yes, I'm feeling something that's uncomfortable. And how would I like to approach it for myself? And sometimes that is, having a good cry and a hug, and just somebody
and having an offload. Doesn't mean you can't offload at all. No, absolutely. I think it's when we say, don't talk about it or use a different term, it's more to remove that focus and have that separation from that symptom being part of you. It doesn't mean that you're not allowed to just have a real offload with somebody and, like you say, have that hug, have that understanding. It's not the extremes, there's got to be a happy medium somewhere.
Because a lot of times these symptoms do come on because we don't feel seen or heard in some way.
Absolutely.
And, finding ways that we can feel seen and heard, at least to ourselves, before others,
Yeah.
We'll always start with ourselves. And I know sometimes it's hard when you feel like you don't have a whole lot of resources to like give yourself that support.
Mm-hmm.
But really, like this is what we have.
So Susie says, if we use the language analogy, maybe you have people who are speaking the new language. I'm not sure what you mean there, Susie. People are speaking the new language. Sorry, Susie, do you want to explain that a bit, please? And then Kate was saying, how do you get other people to stop asking you about the condition, especially when it's been there most of your life?
I don't know. It still happens to me all the time, especially if I haven't seen somebody in a long time. And, the last time they saw me, I was in a lot of pain. I usually will just say, you know what? I'm really doing okay right now. And here's what else is going on. And I just kind of will take them.
I was going to say, yeah.
Like what I do want to focus on and what I do want to talk about now. So they remember the next time, oh, you're working on this cool project. I'll ask her about that next time instead of, how she's feeling.
Yeah. And of course, there's no reason why you can't say, I don't actually want to be seen as a person in pain, or, actually, I'm finding that that things are a lot better when I actually don't focus on it. So, and actually asking people not to ask you how you are or how the pain is, or certain people, rather if you're finding a lot of people are doing that, and just saying, actually, when I don't focus on it and when I start really focusing on other things in my life, I'm finding that's better. So I'm trying not to think about it much. I don't know, whatever you find helpful. So Susie's saying, if we use the language analogy, maybe you have people who are speaking the new language that can help or listen.
Yeah, finding people that are understanding and supportive is one thing. Also, teaching a little bit about what you've learned, what your experience is, and how you would like to be supported or listened to. We have agency to let others know what we need from them. Setting boundaries with people, saying like, look, I'm not interested in talking about this. It doesn't help me. Or, if you are to ask, this is what I need from you. I really just need you to listen to me and not try to solve it, or whatever it is for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was great. Okay, so any other questions moving forward? I think, one of the things that we talked about before we started this was that it's not just about strategies. People do get hung up on, what technique or strategy is the best thing that I should do. And again, really being quite narrowly focusing on what can they do to get better, rather than recognizing that actually there are so many things that they could be considering, and looking at this, like the principles of choosing a sober approach, looking emotionally, physically, looking at the spiritual side or psychological side even, and lifestyle, and just looking at your lifestyle. And many people with pain, pain has become the habit, pain has become the, not just neural pathways, but it's become the focus of their life. And therefore hobbies have dropped away, other things have dropped away. And the more, seeing people, the socializing. So more, and so many people say when they actually have decided that they are going to go out and they're going to see a friend, even just for a coffee, let alone going out and seeing loads of people, that their pain was easier when they did that. But leading up to it, they just didn't feel up to going. But when they're there in the moment, they felt better. So do you want to say something about this, looking more towards lifestyle and things? Susie.
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking about a couple big questions that I often pose to people when they learn about, how pain is a just a protection mechanism. I will often ask people, well, what is the pain protecting you from? who would you have to be if you didn't have pain or symptoms? Like, what are these symptoms serving? How are they serving you?
Yeah.
How would you have to show up in your life if you didn't have them? And that might be, for me, it was like, I'm going to feel overwhelmed. There's going to be too much required of me. I can't possibly do it all. I would actually have to put boundaries in place over, what I am and what I am not willing to do. Well, pain came in as a really great boundary for me.
Absolutely.
Everybody understands, oh, okay, she's not feeling well, we won't ask her to do this. But really starting to investigate some of those things, like the symptom is staying around for a reason and it is serving you, and starting to realize, like, in what ways has this kind of come up, because it's a protection.
Absolutely. It's a protection. It's often hiding a truth within us that we're unable to show, the authentic part of us. And that could help you, Steph. You know, you say when you walk, you have pain pretty quickly after even a couple of minutes. But really exploring that question, I think, is so important. I mean, what is the pain stopping you from doing? You know, how is it protecting you? Developing your emotional awareness. You know, that for me, I think, is one of the biggest things, is to really start, because then it's helping with the authenticity. It's helping you really get underneath the actual, you're still focusing on the body and the sensations, but it's inside the body rather than the symptom itself. And then the more we can work on that, then the more we start noticing little things, like somebody says something and we feel a tension, or we see a message and we feel some sort of tension somewhere. It's that our body, we're either in love or fear, and symptoms like this are all part of that fear side. And so therefore, if we can start recognizing and noticing when the fear comes on or where it increases, then we can start working with that. And it might be that working on emotional awareness, Karen, would be a really good way forward for you, the somatic side, not just the somatic tracking, because when the pain's really high, it can be hard to do the somatic tracking, but you can be doing emotional awareness and the regulating of yourself, the calm breathing, and not pushing into the pain, sort of taking time out, and working on these. And then maybe when things have calmed down, you know, having another go, but not putting pressure on yourself and being very self-compassionate. So what's Karen saying? Learning these new ways of thinking and behaviors can lead to healthy lifestyle and inner emotional intelligence. Absolutely. And this is why, you know, we learn all these ways that are really not good for us, not healthy. And so this is about learning a new language, as Susie said, you know, learning a new language, learning how to behave differently, how to be authentic, how to be more emotionally aware, how to acknowledge, express how we're feeling, because that then stops us from repressing, allows us to be the mind body, which is in flow all the time anyway. So do you want to comment on Susie's comment, Katie?
Protection and a theatrical production by the body, or you are the main actor, maybe. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I at one point was kind of describing, you know, this work as like taking your symptom from being the main character in your life and putting yourself into that role instead. So to use the theater or film, I guess, analogy.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to think that through as well. And you know, the main actor, the main actor, the authentic us, is that the main actor? Is that the main person who then is acting this out, rather than the person with pain? That's the actor. I don't know. I'm just thinking that through. But it's an interesting one.
Yeah, and I can definitely speak to the earlier comment too, Susie, about friends not understanding and leaving.
Yes.
And often that's, for me, that came like in the beforehand times when I was like, I can't go places, I can't do things, and them not understanding in that way. But now that I do this work and I encounter, other people in my life that have chronic symptoms that I want to try to help, I have to learn how to tread lightly and not, sort of evangelize or bombard them with what I now know to be kind of the reality of how this all occurs. And everybody kind of comes to it in their own time, in their own way. And, I don't know who was here at the beginning, but I said that I put John Sarno's book up on the shelf for a good 5 years before I kind of came back to that idea. So I rejected it flat out right away. And then there were just echoes of it that came into my world and made me kind of reconsider a few years later. So kind of, it sucks when people leave and don't understand, and that's the basis of your friendship or whatever. But it's also just really learning how to trust like what to be your own truth, and finding the people that are gonna just stick with you with that.
And I think it's similar when we're working in this field. I go to boot camp and I see so many people with various injuries, or injuries that they haven't really done anything to injure themselves. And I have to let go of the fact that they are really not open to what I'm doing. And so that's always about, recognizing that we are living in a world where a lot of people are not open still to what we are aware of, and letting that go, learning to just be allowing of that and not trying to convince people. And that's not necessarily easy either. Okay, so Susie says, perhaps the authentic you is being out in the world without the costume you've worn for years. Absolutely, Susie. That's another good one. You're good at these, aren't you? So you're very creative, I know. But yeah, that's a good one. I like that. Yeah, and it's interesting because I'm sort of on my own journey, moving further as well at the moment. And when I went through my bookshelves last week, sometime, I found books that were about what I'm doing now, and yet I just wasn't ready for them then. And it's the same with so many people. Even if they are doing this work, they might be reading some of the books or working with one of the practitioners, and then they looking at Susie down to improvise. Very good. That some people will, you might be working with somebody and they'll say, oh, do you know what, that clicked, I got it. And it's like an aha moment. And other people might sort of go and read another book, and they'll just go, okay, that's it. And you might have been talking to them about the same thing for a long time, but listened to it at a different time, in a different way, or reading it in a different way, and layered on top of what they've been doing. That's what's been needed to then have that aha moment. And I think people that sort of read the books and then just have that aha moment, they were ready. It's the right time. Like the soil was fertilized and ready for that seed to be sown because of everything that they'd read and come across or understood before.
Yeah, I mean, they say in marketing or something that, you have to see something 8 times in order to, fully take it in.
Absolutely.
Or trying a new food. Like, when
definitely.
you're introducing kids to new foods, just keep introducing it. Maybe they'll eat it, maybe they won't. But maybe eventually they will.
And then Karen's saying it's hurtful when friends leave the relationship, but new friends will enter. Absolutely, Karen. And what's that saying? Friends are here for a season, a lifetime, or something other. There's a saying, can't remember it now. And sometimes friendships end, but there's always other ones that come along.
Yeah,
maybe that friendship is just to learn from. just as something to learn from.
I love the quote of like, you haven't met all the people that will love you in your lifetime yet.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's a good one. So where are we going now? Any other questions?
Just kind of going back to this idea of improvisation and costume wearing, and your experience in Belgium with the theater class, or the clown class.
Yeah.
That is so much a part of this, is like, okay, who am I without all of these sort of roles or protections?
Yes.
When I am, just standing in front of this crowd of people and allowing myself to be seen. Oh my gosh, so much comes up about, seeing and being seen, and being enough for, how, do I look stupid? Like all of that. And that's, learning how to
there's the fear.
get comfortable with that discomfort will help us get comfortable with our own, symptom discomfort as well. And it won't really come up as strongly.
And I think that massive fear there, with, for example, if you let that belief go, or if you let that behavior go, if you really let go and allow people to see you, there's usually an awful lot of fear there. If you let that protection go, whatever that symptom is there for, how, like you said, how would that make you feel? Who would you be? Because that could be hugely scary. If you really just sort of let go, that can be a scary thing. And it's like going through like a ring of fire for then to be able to go, oh yeah, it's like the Wizard of Oz, so scary until you realize he's just an old man. And then it's like, then there's a release and a letting go. And Lucinda, you're asking how much do beliefs play as a part of this journey? Loads, massive. Beliefs are really important, and they can be, and they're not necessarily true. You have a belief that, I don't know, that could be that the pain that, for example, the pain is due to this prolapsed disc, let's say. Okay, that's a belief. That's just what you've learned. It doesn't mean it's true, because it's not true. Beliefs that we're not good enough. I mean, look at the core beliefs and how much self-induced stress is caused by that. That I'm not good enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not slim enough. I'm not, I can hurt people. There are lots of really deep beliefs, and working through those and really, really working on those can really help with this as well, definitely. So Karen's saying, beside the books, what other programs do you recommend that help people on the chronic conditions such as pain? Well, obviously the SERPA online recovery program. And we can put a link in here. And often people get on to me and say, would this be helpful? I have done this course, that course, read this book, that book. And if somebody has done an awful lot themselves, I would always recommend that they touch base with one of the practitioners like UKT. Most people work online. Most people offer free discovery calls, usually about half an hour. And that can just be a really good way to start to look at what might be a way forward. And it might be that if you spoke to one of our practitioners, that maybe the SERPA recovery program would be a good way forward. For other people, maybe it's actually that you have been doing all this so much that actually maybe there's stuff you're not seeing, because so much of this is unconscious, and actually being able to offload to somebody and also explain and have an experienced person reflect back what's going on, that's when insights have been gained. Or it could be that this is somebody who's constantly in the head, overthinking things, worrying, focusing on the pain, and actually they need to learn to get out of the head and into the body, their emotions somatically, and that's often the case for people moving forward as well.
Yeah, that can be, one of the things that really can be helpful in working with a coach or a practitioner, just that individualized treatment. Like, what has been working, what hasn't been working, what do you feel like is missing? and, you know, kind of crafting sort of a plan for the individual.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just like having a torch, isn't it? Just showing a torch on you.
No one program is all things to all people.
No, absolutely. And it can't be, because it can't be individualized. And so both together can sometimes happen, but it can sometimes be useful, sometimes one or the other. But talking to somebody who understands can be really helpful. And the trouble is, the support groups are great, but the trouble is that usually it's somebody will give you advice depending on their experience. And unless you've worked with lots and lots of people, then it's really hard. You know, individuals can say, well, I did this, you ought to do this, this, this. And that's not necessary. You're not that person. And this is such an individual approach. As you said, not one approach is going to work for everybody. Yeah. So Lucinda, do you want to answer, Katie, do you want to answer Lucinda's question?
I did not, as far as I know, have any big T trauma. Definitely lots of small T trauma. And one thing I know about myself for sure is that I'm an extremely empathetic and extremely sensitive person. So even trauma that happens to somebody else, I find that it impacts me greatly. I'm in Minneapolis, and I'm still kind of dealing with some of the trauma that happened over the killing of George Floyd. Not that like I'm speaking for that community at all, but like just that experience was very intense for many folks here, but especially for folks that you know, were directly impacted, but also for folks that just feel a lot. So, but I also work with people that have had a lot of trauma. Because I'm not a therapist, I don't kind of delve into their history, and nor do I really think that's really helpful to like rehash what happened. But it is,
specialists globally now say that isn't.
But it is helpful to see how that might have informed the ways in which they view the world around them, and the way in which they view themselves in the world, and
the way they behave.
That they have put in place as a protection mechanism.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Okay, well, I think we will draw this to a close now. Thank you all for being there, and thank you to those who are watching it on recording, in the recording as well. Hope you found it helpful. And any questions afterwards, then by all means put it in the comments, and we'll try and remember to go and have a look and answer any questions afterwards.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Questions. I mean, fantastic. So we need the questions to be able to make this work, and that was really good. So thank you all. Great. All the best of everybody then. Take care.